Welcome everyone. It's good to
Thank
hear
you.
all of your voices. I think it's been a while
Thank you.
since we were able to have so many of us on the call at the same time. I'm almost sitting here with fingers crossed because this is very unusual.
Yeah, I know.
So also with me today, I have some familiar faces and some so as you know from the email, Liz is back from her maternity leave. So she's very excited to be back as part of the YLAB group. And also on the call today, we have Petra, who I know you're familiar with via email and WhatsApp already. So I'll let them say hi. Hi, YLAB.
Hi, Petra.
Hi, Petra.
Hi, Petra. Joseph here.
Alrighty. Good to meet all of you. And
hi,
this is
Petra.
Thomas.
Oh,
Thomas.
Yay. Oh, yay.
Wow.
Tom is here. Great. They're full house now.
Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
to be back, and I'm excited that Natasha got to spend all the time she got to spend with you. But I hear from Natasha and Sharon and everyone that went to the conference and met you that you're a fantastic group, and I'm so excited to have the chance to meet you when you come in December.
Thank you so much.
Great. Well, I don't want to jinx anything, so I'll cut off my comments regarding how fortunate it is that we're all here, and we'll take advantage of it and get started. So we had shared an agenda last night. I'll just paste it in the notes here, or in the comment box off to the side, so that we can all look at it if we'd like. But on our agenda today is to, first of all, talk through the data entry and review process. Then we'll also be talking through the research paper. So what will happen once we've collected all of our data. And part of that will be the case studies, so we'll touch on that. And we'll also talk through the updated systems map. So building on the work that you all have done and the additional loop stories that you did a couple weeks ago, we're sharing back sort of what the system map looks like right now. And then we'll also spend a few minutes near the end talking about updates for the December trip. And then also we can answer any questions that might be coming up related to that. I know there's been a lot of communication. Okay. Any questions before we get started?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, great. Okay, great, everyone. So the first item on the agenda is to talk through the research data entry and review process. You all have done a lot of work to gather data from young social entrepreneurs, or in some cases, other young people, to help inform our understanding of this ecosystem, this system that young social entrepreneurs are operating in your different countries. But one thing we touched on briefly in Kigali, and has become clear as we've moved forward since then, is that we also would like to get the perspective of some other actors and stakeholders in that ecosystem. So what we would like to do over the next few weeks is to identify 4 to 5 additional stakeholders for each of you that you would want to reach out to gather information from, to help triangulate the data that you already have, to just verify, is the picture that we're getting from young people complete? Is it correct? Or what other perspectives might these stakeholders bring that will help us to get a deeper, richer understanding of the system that young social entrepreneurs are working in. So we want to make sure that our final system map includes perspectives other than young people. Of course, given that they are at the center of the system, we do want the majority of perspectives to be from them, but we want to flesh that out and make sure that we're capturing the nuances and different perspectives that other stakeholders might have. So these other stakeholders could be a variety of people depending on your context. It could be people who are making policy. It could be local leaders in the community. It could be NGO staff, including perhaps DOT staff, people who are working with young people, people who are working in the areas of social entrepreneurship. Just thinking about in your context, who are those people who might be able to supplement the data that you've already gathered. So this is something that will be connecting you with the country coordinators, connecting you and the country coordinators together so that they can help you in identifying who these stakeholders might be and also setting up meetings. And again, keeping in mind that perhaps some of your stakeholders could be DOT staff themselves. And some of the questions to consider to help you identify who these stakeholders can be are, who else should I talk with to make my story about youth and social enterprise complete? And what are the gaps in my current knowledge or research? So again, thinking about if we are trying to get towards this, sorry everyone, if we are trying to get towards this more complete, deeper picture, where are the gaps in your current knowledge or research that you might want to explore more and get the input from some of these other stakeholders? So this is something that we would like you to be doing between now and the middle of September. So the first step over the next couple of days will be for you to get in touch with your country coordinators and for you yourselves to start thinking about who would be the potential stakeholders that you would be interested in meeting with, thinking about those two questions. And then work with your country coordinators to identify 4 to 5 stakeholders that you can meet with and start to set up those meetings. And also in part of the preparation phase is to think about what questions will you be asking the stakeholders. You know, our interview guides are in most cases tailored to youth. What adjustments might you need to make to your interview guide to take into perspective of other stakeholders? So I'll pause there for a moment. Are there any questions so far?
Yeah.
Not?
So for me,
Sorry, Regine, go
No,
ahead.
Regine, continue. Continue.
We'll go to you.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there is something like coordinators are just going to follow when helping us to identify those stakeholders. For example, if I want to talk to a person in charge of education, to be like realistic, because we have northern province, south, like different areas. So is it possible to look for a person at maybe country level to get that information? Because if I talk to a person from Kigali, he or she's going to focus on people living in Kigali, like education here in Kigali. Why I want just to include all areas. Is there anything that we are going to follow when identifying those stakeholders with us?
Sorry, Regine, it was a bit difficult to hear you. The connection is not great. I did get that you had some questions around the people that we're identifying and perhaps the areas where they come from and the areas that their expertise would be relevant to. Or you had mentioned about somebody from Kigali might be looking more at how your questions relate to the experience of Valley, but I didn't quite get where your question was.
My question is there any guideline for country coordinators to make sure that they give us or they recommend people at country level, because we talk to different people from different areas, instead of maybe if they know a person from Kigali or from another region, that won't be fair to all areas. So country level might be more helpful than. Is there any guideline for those country coordinators who are going to help us? I don't know if my question is clear.
Yes, I think I understood. So you're asking if there are guidelines for country coordinators, specifically around maybe them identifying people who have knowledge at the country level rather than perhaps just in specific regions.
Yes, that's it.
There are no formal guidelines for the country coordinators that are set. I think it's something that will depend on who's available, on also your research and what the gaps are. So I foresee this as being a discussion between you and the country coordinators, because in order also for them to make recommendations about who you could talk to, they need to hear from you about who you're looking for, where you see the gaps being. So if you are feeling that you don't have that national level perspective that you would like, that could be a conversation point with your country coordinator. You would like to speak with somebody who has that more national perspective if possible. And again, keeping in mind that we're also somewhat limited or constrained by who we have contacts with and relationships with that we can put you in contact with. So it's not to say that if there's a certain type of person that you would like to meet that we can necessarily guarantee that would be possible. But I think it's certainly a discussion that you can have with the country coordinator, and they'll know who who DOT in your country has relationships with that you could leverage, and perhaps they can make suggestions to you on who they think would have an interesting perspective for you. And then you can also share with them what are the specific perspectives that you're hoping to get. And then together we can, work through and decide who will you actually meet with.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Regine, everyone. Liz here. I just want to add to what Natasha said, and also ask a clarification point to Natasha. I would imagine that you don't need to go through the country coordinators for every stakeholder. Is that right, Natasha?
Yes, if you have contacts with stakeholders that you would like to contact, please feel free to make those connections directly.
Right. So, for example, you might want to talk to somebody from from the government, right, to get a policy perspective. Well, somebody from your local community, a local community leader, might be able to provide a perspective, and maybe you have contacts with that person. I think the country coordinators are really there to support you because DOT has a wide variety of partners and stakeholders we're connected with. So as Natasha said, once you identify whom you want to speak with, see if you already are connected to that person or have connections yourself. I would say approach them first if you already have that connection, and then go through the country coordinators if you need the country coordinators to make a connection for you. And also remember, the higher up you go, the more time it's going to be to get a meeting with that stakeholder. So if, I don't know if you're so ambitious you want to speak with the Minister of Education, but that will probably be, a month or two before you're able to get on his or her schedule. So try to be realistic about the type of people that you can actually speak with. And they don't have to, you might find that they don't have to be people in the highest positions who can provide a perspective.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, but Nat, I was wondering, are you able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mira.
Yeah, I was wondering, it's very huge number, 45 stakeholders, you know, especially here in Lebanon, because I think it would be hard for me to collect 45 stakeholders. I don't
Sorry,
know if others, YLABs,
sorry,
have the same view. You said that I have to meet 45 stakeholders, right? To validate my point, the points of view of the youth, entrepreneurs.
it was 4 or 5 stakeholders. It
Yeah.
sounded like
I
45.
heard, you know, I heard 45 and I felt and I
Oh.
felt dizzy from now.
Yeah, that would be quite daunting.
That would be exciting.
Oh,
Hello? This is
Hi, Thomas. We can hear you.
okay. Actually, I have done this job, this work, this task 2 weeks ago. I was talking to my country coordinator, Rosom, and I asked him to give me a list of stakeholders that I was going to, that I'm, and he told me to come back some other time and he will prepare for me the list and their contacts. As far as I was out of the city for 2 weeks, I haven't went to start this task, plan office and get those contacts from my country coordinator. So that's all I'm doing right now.
That's fantastic, Thomas. Thank you for sharing that. And perhaps could you share a little bit more about who were the stakeholders that you decided to approach?
Okay, the stakeholders. The first one is it could be politicians that has the influence on the policy, policy makers. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
NGOs, who supports users, NGO that directly support users, and there is a government agency which directly supports and also people involved in the registration process. That's all. That's those interview the stakeholders that I propose.
That sounds great, Thomas. And I like how you've identified stakeholders that link to some of the challenges that had come out in your research. I thought the end you mentioned the people involved in the registration process, and you had highlighted in Kigali that that is a particular challenge for young social entrepreneurs, that the process is complicated, there's nothing specifically for them. So great to have that influence who you will contact.
Thank you.
I have another question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Regine.
Okay. So is there any specific information we can collect in addition to different questions? Of course, we will ask regarding research that you will need us to include in the report. For example, main position, I don't know, specific information you want us to collect?
Regine, you broke up a little bit, but what I heard was, I think you're asking if, in addition to questions around the content that we're looking for, the additional information, you're asking if you should ask questions around perhaps some of the background information of the people you're talking to. So their position and perhaps what their organization or institution does and that sort of thing. Was that your question? Oh, we lost Regine. Okay, well, I will assume that that is her question and answer that for the group, and then we can touch base with her if it was something different. But I would say, approach your interview with your stakeholders very similar to how you've structured your interviews with young people. So in your interview guide with young people, you asked a lot of background information so that you could understand their answers in context with who they were. And I think it would be appropriate to do that with the stakeholders as well. So the information that you ask stakeholders might be slightly different than youth. For young people, we were asking, you know, their age and things like that. That might not be relevant for the stakeholders, but still other information on, you know, their gender, their position, which organization they're with, what that organization is mandated to do, where they operate. Those types of questions. You may think of others, but I think it's appropriate to ask those so that you can understand their responses in context of who they and their organization is.
Can I add something here?
Just a moment, Thomas. I just wanted to check with Regine if that was her question.
Yes, it was it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Regine. Okay, sorry, Thomas. Over to you.
Okay, I'm also using, in order to get enough information, I'm also using secondary data, which is to mean a data or a research that has been prepared by other people or organizations in terms of use and social entrepreneurs. So I think it will help us as a baseline. So we can use secondary data in addition to the primary data or in addition to the interview. So it will be better to talk written. So that's what I'm using right now currently too.
Thank you, Thomas. An excellent suggestion.
So I think it's a better idea.
Oh, yes, that's a great idea, Thomas. There's a lot of other data that we can pull in to deepen our understanding. And just as a piece of advice to everyone, if you are pulling on some of the secondary data or if you're doing desk research, let's just make sure that we document where we're getting this information from. So, you know, collecting source information, kind of like you would do for, you know, a bibliography for a project that you might have done in school, so that we have all of that information. So when we go to the analysis, we're very clear on where we got specific points of data from.
And also, if I can just add, if they're electronic documents, if you can save them, because when we're synthesizing the data and preparing the report, we might need to refer to the document again if we need more information.
Hello, Joseph here. I don't know whether I can step in there a bit.
Sure, go ahead.
I think Thomas raises a very, very good suggestion, because one of the challenges I've been facing in Kenya is that the documented social enterprises, most of them are not locally owned. They are owned by people who have raised funding from, say, venture capitalists abroad. Then they have come and invested in Kenya. I'm talking about, you know, Bridge Group of Schools. I'm talking about Twiga Foods. I'm talking about Sanaji. These are all not Kenyans, but they are whites who have come into Kenya, and they have raised funding and they are addressing local challenges. But if you come around to young people who are starting social enterprises in Kenya, it becomes a very, very hard task to look for them, because one, maybe they don't even have our website. Number two, they don't have any say internet presence that you can actually tag them to. So the only secondary data we get is primarily from investors who are not local. So when Thomas says that we can look at secondary data, I think it weighs on so much on me, because that I get primarily is from these institutions, and unluckily you cannot be able to secure interviews with them because it's a big organization. The founder is not there to tell you why they founded it. It's run by locals but founded outside the country. I think that was my input.
Hello.
Hi, Samson. Was your comment in response to Kamau, or were you going to touch on the point you've raised in the chat box?
On what Kamau was saying.
Okay, please go ahead.
Maybe just I initially also thought it was hard to find social entrepreneurs. That was basically because I was looking for available information from people who know. But for the past 2 weeks, when I had chance to go to, I actually saw it as an opportunity. I actually met some young social entrepreneurs who were already doing something, though they were not out there, but an event like that brought them for me to be able to see actually there are some young people with small initiatives already taking place, and they are creating change somewhere. Maybe in addition to using the coordinators, the people we know, and asking them to share information with you, it might be wise when you hear of any youth event, any youth gathering somewhere, take advantage, go there. Because what I got to realize is that when you ask people to refer, they will always want to be at a level where they will refer you to someone whose enterprise is at a higher level, and that's what they will look for. Yet for this, we are looking for those that have big ideas, big projects, as well as those who are either starting or they have started but at a smaller size. I found events can help identify, because it's you who knows what you're looking for. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all that I had to put, and I will connect that with the information I've put on the chat. Really, when I went to those events, it's when I got these young people, and I will find time to talk to a few of them, though not exhaustively on my research, but I'll observe what they're doing, talk to a few of them in response to some of the knowledge and information that I am seeking in regards to the research that I'm carrying out. And so how do I enter such data in the template that was provided?
Great. And just to clarify, your observations, were they observations of people that you were interviewing, or it's observations of others?
Of people that I've been interviewing, and others, like I said, I would give some time to talk for a little while with them, though I didn't have the interview guide with me to take them through all the questions, but I will make sure I ask 1 or 2 questions from my research interview guide. Most of the time observing many other social entrepreneurs in the event.
Sam, I think that could be an interesting thing to add and document in terms of you presenting results from your experience, because observation could be a very useful way of learning about what's happening on the ground. So for any of you YLAB members, if you attend any events or you're in a situation whereby you're observing interesting things that could feed into your research, we encourage you to document that, and you can present it as, part of your research, but just say these are observations from different events, and that will be a very interesting addition for us to learn from as well.
And Sam, in
Thank
terms
you.
of how to maybe enter that, I would say for those observations that are from people that you interview, perhaps on perhaps on your table, you would add additional columns where you can enter the observations.
Natasha, your voice is faint. This is Joseph. I can't hear you well.
Oh, okay, sorry. Is this better?
Far much better.
Okay, great, thank you. And Joseph,
You're lost now again.
oh, can others hear me or?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
But I can also hear baby. I don't know.
Yeah, I think perhaps Joseph, could you mute your microphone? All right, thank you. I hope this is a bit better. I'm speaking as close to the microphone as I can, but we also have the recording. So if anybody misses anything, you will be able to catch up. So Sam, what I would suggest is for those observations that are people you interviewed, you could add columns onto your data entry sheet where you allow space to input your observations. So you would have the observations for, on the same row as the other information about that particular social entrepreneur, but in a separate place, a separate column. So it's clear that these are your observations, not their responses. And then for the other types of observations, I think it's a little bit dependent upon the data that you have. But one suggestion I would have is in a different tab, perhaps document out such things as, where you observed this, who you were observing, and then start to note what your observations were. And that's something we could perhaps touch more with offline, so one-on-one, if you'd like some more guidance on how that could be structured. But I think capturing where you were making the observation, who you were observing, what was going on at that time, and then noting your observations are the critical things. Liz, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Thomas and Kamal's point about bringing in external sources and desk research. That's a really good approach, and generally speaking, that's something that researchers want to do, right? To paint a full story. I just want to bring it back to kind of the purpose of your research and the purpose of YLAB, and remind everyone that the beauty of what you're doing is you're bringing to surface voices from your context that most external audiences have not heard. So it's not important that you get the most accurate or most broad perspective on social enterprise in your country. It's important that you tell a story that comes from your context, from the data that you have. So if, in Kamal's case, if you can't get a very robust conversation with social entrepreneurs who are local Kenyans, that's a story you can tell. And you don't have to necessarily supplement it with external resources. I would say if you do want to bring in external resources, stick to local resources that we might not be able to access. For example, if there's something in a local newspaper or a local magazine, or if you interview a local journalist, that's really important information. If you're thinking of supplementing information, for example, by taking something off Ashoka's website, a publication from Acumen, or a publication from the UN, I think that's something we want to avoid, because we want this to be as original of research as possible.
And just to loop this back to one of the conversations we had in Kigali, that sometimes the absence of data is in itself data. That tells us something. We had talked about this, I think, in the context of we discovered through some of our data that not social networks, but networks in general were such a powerful enabler of social entrepreneurs. And then some of us were having trouble identifying networks and social entrepreneurs in our countries. Well, that in its own way reinforces the hypothesis that we were making about the importance of social networks. So don't always be afraid if you see that you have gaps in data. that in and of itself can sometimes tell us a lot about the ecosystem. All right. Just being aware of the time, are we okay moving on to our next agenda item, or did anybody have any further questions or comments related to the additional research with stakeholders? I will take that as a no. So another point on the research data itself is we just wanted to check in regarding the data entry. So thank you to those who have provided updates on when you anticipate being able to enter your data. We are looking to have all of the data entered by this Friday, August 25th. And we suggest that you at least try to enter some of your data by tomorrow, just in case you're encountering any challenges or any questions come up as you're going about it. We can answer those tomorrow and early day Friday so that you still have time to complete by end of day Friday. Please, reach out to us by email or WhatsApp if you are facing any challenges or have questions as you go through this. And the reason that we are trying to stick to the data being entered by this Friday is that Liz and I want to be able to provide feedback to you by Wednesday next week. So Wednesday, August 30th, we'll provide feedback to you on any areas where perhaps things are not clear or we wanted to probe to see if there was additional information. And then a week after that, which would be Wednesday, September 6th, would be the time that we would like everybody to respond to the feedback. So that by Wednesday, September 6th, we have all of your current data uploaded and clarified in the Google Drive. And we'll be providing, when we share the feedback, we'll be providing more guidance about how to go about responding to it. Our priority will be on addressing any perhaps critical clarifications or critical gaps in information, and not necessarily on addressing any smaller areas. So we'll be providing that clarification to you in our feedback about where are the priorities, which in some cases will perhaps just a clarification with what you've written, so it's something you can go back to your notes. In rare cases, it may involve contacting the interviewees again just to clarify points, but that we'll be providing more details on when we share the feedback next Wednesday. Any questions or comments on that? Oh, I see Mira is just on the WhatsApp group. I think we've lost her. We'll try to reconnect her. So it looks like we're okay, no questions. So then we'll move on to the next item of our agenda, which is to talk a little bit about the research paper. So, we've done all of this great research, gathered all of this information. What's the next step? What will we be doing? So just a reminder on the purpose of the research paper. This is to be the culmination of your work as a YLAB researcher, which is one of your key roles as a YLAB member. And we really want it to be a showcase piece, really bringing forward the excellent work that you've done. This research is quite unique in that it reaches out so much to young people and really about bringing their voice forward. And we want to have an opportunity for you to really show off the work that you've done and showcase those young voices. This paper will also be the guiding document for a lot of the talking opportunities that will come up during your visit in December. So this research paper, as we've talked about before, is going to be circulated widely on the website with our partners And this will form the basis of what you will present to DOT's board in December, and what you'll be talking about with some of the different partners and other speaking opportunities that we're looking at. So that's the purpose. In terms of the structure and content, the content will focus very much on the original research that you have done, which has been feeding into the system map that we've been developing together. So the research paper will be a combination of this research synthesis, which is looking at, what are a lot of the common patterns and themes that we're seeing across countries. So those things that informed our system map, those areas where we're seeing these are the biggest enablers or inhibitors to young people entering into and succeeding in social enterprise. So bringing together those common themes, identifying some of those common stories of young people engaging in social enterprise across our countries. But also, it will include the more in-depth case studies. So those will be more individual pieces where each of you will be developing case studies, and we'll talk about that more in depth in a moment, that really illustrate what one of these more general stories looks like for a specific person in your country. So we can start to see how, the individual contexts of different countries and, also individual people, how these broader stories and themes that we're seeing play out in an individual situation. So that's what the overall paper will look like, both the sort of universal themes that are coming across all of your research, as well as a more in-depth look at specific people who illustrate some of these themes. In terms of the timelines and process, you will be coming to Ottawa in December. So we want to have the research paper finalized, which includes, we also want it to look very nice. So we're engaging consultants to help us design it. We want it to be done by the end of November. And the design process for how the document looks itself takes a month. So we really want to have the paper written and finalized and reviewed by the end of October. The review process will take a few weeks because we want to have a number of different people reviewing the research, both yourselves, obviously, as young people, reviewing the different stages of the paper to make sure it reflects, your voices and your vision, as well as other people within DOT. So we will be hiring a consultant to do some of the writing on the overall themes. So those pieces will be working with a consultant. So that will begin in mid-September, and we hope to have a draft from them in early October. But then also we'll be working with you to develop these individual case studies, which will be sort of that second piece of the research paper. So to talk a little bit more about the case studies, so based upon the common themes that are emerging from the research, or on the other case, it could also be outliers, unique situations or unique people that we're seeing. We will be identifying young social entrepreneurs in each of your countries that you will be doing more in-depth interviews and research with in order to develop this case study. So who we will pick will become more clear as we synthesize and analyze the data, which is what we'll be doing in early September once it's uploaded. Liz and I will share a template with you for how to go about collecting information for the case study and also writing the case study, and we'll be coaching you throughout that process. With the case study being due at the end of September. These case studies will be between 1 to 2 pages in length. And again, it will really be looking at somebody who illustrates either a common or very unique story within the world of young social entrepreneurs, so that we can really illustrate to people, you know, what this situation looks like for an actual young entrepreneur, so that we have that combination in the final paper between the general themes and specific individuals and their story. So just a reminder, when you think about your timeline for September, that will involve doing some additional interviews with the focus of your case study. So factor in time for that, and then also writing the draft of that case study. And again, keeping in mind that we'll be submitting the draft case studies at the end of September. And again, Liz and I will share more details in the coming weeks in terms of the template for the case study, some guidance on how to go about collecting the additional information. And then of course, as we move through the data analysis and synthesis in early September, we can start to discuss who would be ideal people to approach for case studies in each of your countries. I'll pause there if there are any questions or comments related to the research paper and case studies.
Thanks, Natasha, for that explanation on what the case study is.
Did you have a question, Sam?
Yeah. How many entrepreneurs are we looking at for the case studies? Is it possible just going to be one young social entrepreneur, or a number of them?
For the case study, because it's a more in-depth, we would be looking at one in-depth case study for each of you.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Sam. Any other questions or comments? All right, so before we move on to the December trip updates, while we're talking about the research paper, I did want to give you an update on the systems map that we've been working on. So in my email yesterday, I shared a link to what the current systems map is looking like. So this is you know, the culmination of the work we did in Kigali, as well as you'll remember, I think it was in late July, early August, we asked you to develop the stories for individual loops. What does the journey of a young social entrepreneur in, you know, digital tools look like? What does it look like when we're talking about networks? What are the steps that they go through as they're engaged in that space? And then from there, we used your stories to update what those loops would look like, to really draw out what are the most critical pieces. So that is what I shared, and let me just share my screen. It's going to be a bit small. All right, so this is what I had shared in my email. So I apologize, it's probably looking very small on your screens. But after the call, please feel free to open this up and you can zoom in and see it. So we have here the different loops that were developed based on your stories. So this representation, what we have here is we came out that there are sort of 5 core loops. So there is what we have called the supporting environment. So this is what the capacity building turned into. because we realized there was also some other elements that you were touching on in your stories that went beyond, just straight capacity building. And it was really about that overall supporting environment that social entrepreneurs find themselves in. Then there was also public perception that came out very strongly in the stories, that how other members of the public and even young people themselves perceive the idea of social entrepreneurship has a lot of impact on whether young people will start social enterprises and how supportive government agencies and the public are to their efforts and their goals. Then there was also this area which we've are calling social entrepreneurship resilience. So this is really about their ability to adapt to the context that they're in, how they can build their confidence, how they can access funding, all of those elements that kind of support them to sustain their work and to keep being motivated and engaged. Then off to the side, there was the business design. So there was a lot of things coming out in the stories around, it's important for young people to have strong business models. And so that came out as a bit of a mini loop on its own. And then finally, there's the digital aspect. So that is still looking to be quite a separate loop. It has a lot of interactions with other loops, but it's really standing, as you can see, as quite a clear loop on its own, whereas some of the others, are quite intersecting. So I wanted to share this with you and ask you over, the next week or so to have a closer look at it. And as you look at it, ask yourself, does this make sense? Do you think this represents the interactions that you shared in Kigali? Is this an accurate picture of the influences on young social entrepreneurs as we know it? And is anything missing? Is there perhaps something that has come out that in your research that you're not seeing here? And if you do find those, let's note those on the WhatsApp group, and I'll send a prompt out early next week so that we can start to share our reactions to this and see, do we feel this is accurate and what might be missing, so that we can add those elements in or correct any of those elements before we move on to the next step of the map. So I'll pause here for a moment and just ask if anyone has any questions or comments related to the updated system map.
Hello, Natasha.
Yes, Sam.
Yeah, this is a great work. Thank you so much for putting all these pieces together. It really brings up the picture of what social entrepreneurship is and the system in which young social entrepreneurs operate in. And I think maybe what I just thought maybe is missing is that apart from the business model that a social entrepreneur must be innovative and creative, but there should also be that element of measuring the impact. And I think we talked about this, but when I looked through the map, the systems map, I didn't see where it is reflected. But it's important that social entrepreneurs report the impact that they create and they measure it. So impact measurement needs to be one of those things we might consider. It might be connected to the business design.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they need to be clear on what change am I looking at to create in my community, and what are the indicators for me to measure the change that this enterprise, the enterprise we're setting up, is designed to the mission of this of their social enterprise, and they should measure it. It's one of the things that motivates social entrepreneurs. It's not just about the profits or the money that is made to sustain it, but also, am I creating the change? Is that change coming up? How do I know it? How do I measure it? Mm-hmm. So that the social entrepreneur can go a long way to say, yeah, we're able to create this change and also sustain the social enterprise through an income generating model, which is a business model in that case.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point, Sam. And I agree. And I'm just looking back through it because I do remember that we did highlight the measuring impact as one of the components. So I'm taking note of that. And I think that's a potential area where perhaps that nuance, has been lost as we've tried to consolidate our many elements into sort of a more cohesive structure. So I'm taking a note of that. But I definitely think that there is a role for that. Perhaps somewhere, we have the community challenge feeding into the passion, which I think is, touching on what you said, where not only is it that young people are motivated to enter social entrepreneurship because they see a problem that they want to address, but then, as they are working in their communities, as they see changes to that problem, as they're able to measure their impact, that can feed back into their passion. So that's definitely not coming out in our current model. So thank you for sharing, and we'll make a note so that we can adjust and update.
Thank you.
Natasha, I also noticed the gap in digital being quite left out in terms of not many links are linking back to it, and ideally it speaks more of the business models that possibly are lacking in the social enterprises that we are looking at. Mm-hmm. One is that digital presumably I looked at it as a chance or as an opportunity for the social enterprises to scale their impact beyond their locality. Mm-hmm. But when you see digital being having not many loops pointing to it, then maybe it speaks to what I'm seeing currently, that most of the social enterprises that I'm talking to do not understand, or rather, they don't use digital in any way to scale their enterprises. Maybe they'll just open a Facebook page, they'll talk a little bit about themselves, and then that's the end. Rarely will you find them with a website or anything. So I think it's an area of concern. And as I keep on researching, maybe new data will come back to me, informing me maybe why they are not using it, or rather whether they have used it in the past and it didn't bring out the results that they wanted, or else maybe the models they are using are not meant to scale digitally. So I take a lot of keen interest in that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kamal. That's an excellent point. And as you were talking, I'm remembering some of the discussions we had where we were linking scaling into digital marketing and innovation. But I'm wondering if we'd sort of left those areas to encompass scaling. But I do think that the issue of scale is so important and so specific kind of to a digital approach that it might be worth drawing it out again as a separate thing. So I'm taking a note of this, and these are also discussions that we can continue in the coming weeks, but this is exactly what we're hoping for in terms of feedback is, where are those elements that maybe aren't coming out clearly or missing, or other linkages that perhaps you see that are not currently captured here. So thank you.
Hello, just to add on something little on digital and its connection to social entrepreneur resilience. I think DOT is developing an online platform for supporting young social entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And that platform one of the things I think when I attended the sessions in Kigali was offering mentorship. But I'm not seeing mentorship being connected to digital directly. Yet I think we could have a connection between digital platforms and mentorship. And also there are social entrepreneurs who are doing fundraising, or they call it what? Crowdfunding. So you might think about it and see how to connect it. And fundraising, which is next to social entrepreneur, to resilience, and some of them already using crowdfunding to do resource mobilization online for their cause. But all in all, the systems map is, to me, it is clear.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I also agree with those points. So we're taking note of them. And we can also continue this over the next few days as you have a chance to perhaps go deeper and think and reflect on these more. We'll be gathering these and capturing these reactions so that we can make sure that we update this map and that we're all comfortable with it before we move on to the next stage.
Natasha, may I say something? I think some excellent point you raised there in terms of digital and mentorship and fundraising. Eh? And that's why I had initially commented and said, I don't understand why digital seems left out. Yet we are looking at the whole plethora of one. You've developed a social enterprise that you want to scale. Scaling, I'm talking about maybe it is working in your area and you want to see somebody you can partner with in terms of one, recruiting for talent, two, possibly franchising, three, crowdfunding, four, in terms of looking for customers in terms of digital marketing. There's a lot of things that we have noticed that are happening by maybe not locally owned social enterprises that possibly the locally owned social enterprises are not taking advantage of. So if we say that there's a model, and I've seen it, that is coming up of mentorship for the young social entrepreneurs, the question is, if they are not currently using digital tools for their own enterprises, how feasible is it that they'll be able to be mentored digitally, yet in the first place they're not using it? I don't know whether my point is clear. But anyway, these are call for more focused attention towards what is happening in terms of youth-led social enterprises and the digital space that would allow them scale in terms of talent recruitment, funding, and all these other things that I've mentioned.
Excellent, Kamau. And if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, it's almost like the digital aspect is kind of can be potentially a bit of a bottleneck for young people. Those who don't have the skills or knowledge to access the digital space, they're very limited in terms of being able to do all of the things that they could potentially do with digital tools, whether it's marketing, accessing mentorship, accessing funding. But that's only possible if we get them the skills and the access to the tools. So it's kind of almost a bit of a bottleneck isn't the right word that I'm looking for, but it's a bit of a gate where we have to kind of get them through that to be able to access all of these other opportunities. I don't know, is that sort of in line with what you were saying?
Agreed completely. Yeah? But then it's looking into what are they doing now and what can they be educated towards digital and more use of it towards scaling in all these perspectives.
So leveraging perhaps what they're already doing and building their skills further.
Leverage is the right word.
Okay, great. Guys, it's always such a pleasure to have these discussions.
Yeah. So for me, I appreciate that you're given chance to reflect, remember different things, and then share ideas after this meeting, because that's what difference for me. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
So yes, let's take a few more days to reflect and look at this, and we can start another discussion, perhaps over WhatsApp, early next week, and pull out some of those other ideas that are coming from people. Okay, so I'm just looking at the time. We have about 10 minutes left. Were there any other immediate questions related to the systems map, or are we okay moving on to the December trip?
Maybe an apology from my end, Natasha. I've been running a project out of Nairobi that has gotten me moving out maybe once or a whole week, which means that I've not been able to upload my data and maybe a few other things. But hopefully between this week and next week, I should be able to upload my data and update myself on what has been happening. So I was only back this coming, the previous Sunday.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Kamal. And I think in terms of priorities, our biggest priority at the moment is uploading the data. So we are aiming to do that for this Friday. I know we've talked about a number of other things as well. Those can certainly wait until next week. And if you are having some other concerns or challenges, please feel free to reach out to Liz and I on WhatsApp, and we can talk through that a bit more. But in terms of, and this goes for everyone, the biggest priority at the moment is to upload your current data into the system. So other things that we've talked about, we can wait until after that's done. Okay.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you, Kamal. Okay, so on to December trip updates. This is perhaps the most exciting part of the call. I'll get to plan for what we hope will be a very rewarding and enriching trip to Ottawa in December. So first, we just wanted to get an update from everybody on where you are in your application. So if everybody could just perhaps type in the chat box to the side where you are in the application process. And also we'll open it up while people are doing that. We don't have time right now to delve into specific troubleshooting on the applications, but is there anybody who would like support on the application? If you can let us know, and Petra and I can reach out to you one-on-one after the call to provide that support.
I lost internet a few seconds ago. Did you ask any questions? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Regine, we couldn't hear you very clearly. Would it be possible to type? So otherwise, I will assume, oh, okay. Sorry, Regine. I'll type out quickly what I said, just a moment. Okay, great. Okay, so if everybody else can also type updates in the chat box where they are in the process. Meanwhile, we just wanted to give you a quick overview of what the trip will look like. So as you saw from the invitation letters, we're anticipating having you be in Ottawa from December 3rd to around the 14th or 15th. And of course, there would be a day or two of travel on either side of that. There's a variety of different activities that we're looking at. So likely the first couple of days in Ottawa would be a chance for you to rest for a bit and also to prepare with DOT staff for the different speaking opportunities that will be coming up. So we'll be doing some prep virtually in November beforehand, but while you're here, there will be an opportunity to really practice and go through some of the talking points and make sure that everybody's comfortable with the different speaking opportunities that will be happening over the week and a half that you're here. And some of those speaking opportunities include, of course, presenting your research to DOT's board. That will be one of the first events. There'll also be opportunities to present what you've done to the wider DOT staff and have, you know, a bit of an informal discussion with them about your research and some of the lessons that you've learned. We are also trying to set up some meetings with some high-level partners and stakeholders in Ottawa. That includes people from the Government of Canada who funds one of our largest projects. So potentially meeting with, for example, the Minister of Development and some of the staff at Global Affairs Canada, which is the international development agency. Potentially also meeting with some representatives from another one of our donors, MasterCard Foundation. These are two key partners who have really supported DOT over the years and invested a lot in our work to engage young people and really gather their voices and integrate them into our programs. One of the other key events will be an opportunity to engage more with the public. So perhaps a panel discussion in one of the evenings where we invite some partners and other development practitioners so that you can share some of your key findings and they have an opportunity to, you know, ask questions and engage with you. In addition to that, we're also looking at opportunities for you to interact with other young people. So perhaps meeting with the Prime Minister's Youth Council, which is a group of young people who, like yourselves, are really promoting the voices of young people within governance, in their case, to the Prime Minister. Also potentially meeting with different innovation hubs or different social entrepreneurs in Canada so that you can, you know, see if there are any similarities and differences to what's happening here versus what's happening in your countries. So these are some of the activities that we're considering. And of course, there will also be social opportunities as well. So we will be making sure you have some fun. It won't be all work. And perhaps, you know, some sightseeing and some engagement with DOT staff after hours, relaxing and having fun as well. And just to highlight that all of these are activities that we hope to happen. A lot of it depends upon the availability of our partners and stakeholders. So nothing is guaranteed at the moment, other than, of course, the meeting with the DOT board and meetings with staff and the public panel. But some of our other interactions really depend upon the availability of our partners. So more to come on that as plans become finalized. But that is what we're thinking for the moment. So here I would like to pause and just check if you have any questions related to the trip in December.
No, I just wanted to say something about the visa applications. We're thinking that if you're able to submit your application by the beginning of September, that will give us enough time to be able to work with all the other logistics. I know that some of you have already submitted the applications and we're just waiting to make the payment using the credit card. But if you haven't done so, I haven't read your notes, but I'll perhaps just go through your notes about where you are at. But other than that, it's going to be winter time when you guys come here, so get ready for the snow.
And we'll help prepare you for that as well, don't worry. So that's the end of our agenda, but I just wanted to check if there are any questions or comments before we wrap up. Okay. Please go ahead, Regine. So just Petra made a side comment to me that she'll follow up with all of you regarding your updates on the visa. Regine, were you trying to ask something? Oh, okay, great. All right, well, you're welcome, Samson. Well, thank you all very much for joining the call and taking the time. And once again, it's been wonderful to have so many of us. We didn't keep the full group for the full time, but I think this might be a record for the amount of people that we've been able to have on the Google Hangouts at one time. I'm very excited. So as always, we'll be sharing the link to the broadcast and the notes afterwards. And thank you once again for your active participation and really wonderful insights.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for everything.
All right. You have a good night.
To you too, we appreciate. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.